Hey guys, time for your last exam. This is my buddy. This is my dog, Spartacus Larry Bird Howell right here. Say hi, Sparky. All right. My first dog was Irvin Magic Johnson Howell. Unfortunately, he passed away, but now we have Sparky. He's a pretty good dog. All right. Good boy. All right, Jackson, get this animal out of here. Go. Go. Okay. So here we go. So your final will be vocabulary you'll type out, study guide, type out the questions and the answers, and the essay. All right, so let's get started on this. From your textbook where it says study the following maps, don't worry about it, but answer questions 2 through 6 for me. I'll let you do those on your own. Additional hits, mainly from the lectures. Let's do that. By the way, it's so nice out here right now. It's about 70 with a light breeze and clean air. I'm loving this. Great place to do a review. So, what countries were created during the partition of British India in 1947? Okay. India was created, and there was initially an East and a West Pakistan created. It was separated by Indian territory. So, West Pakistan eventually became known as Bangladesh, 1971-72, that time period. Know the countries of East, Southeast, South, and Southwest Asia. So I'd like you to list those for me. So I'll let you do that probably on your own. East Asia is things like, that would be Mongolia and China, both the Koreas, Japan, Taiwan, if we consider that a country. And then go on and do Southeast Asia, give me South Asia, right? The big guy there is India, obviously, and give me Southwest Asia, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and so on. So list those out for me, okay? What state of the demographic transition, that should say what stage of the demographic transition is India currently in? So that's back to Unit 1. There were 3 stages. So India's in stage 2, which is called the transition stage, where it still has relatively high birth rate, but the death rate has dropped, so the population is still growing relatively quickly in India. Know where the world's major religions originated, okay? So Islam is the youngest major world religion. We're going to say that originated in Mecca, in current-day Saudi Arabia. Hinduism originated in South Asia, right where India is. Buddhism originates right there near the Nepal-Indian border. And so why don't we just say Nepal on that for Buddhism. Christianity would be Southwest Asia. I guess we would talk about the West Bank, Bethlehem, I guess, where Israel currently is. Let's see here. So generally understand how the caste system operates in India. The caste system results in fixed social layers within Indian society based on ancestry and intertwined with the Hindu religion. So there are 4 main castes in India and thousands of subcastes. The 4 main castes are Brahmins, warriors, traders, and laborers. And then even outside of the caste system, there's a group of people, maybe 200 million. How do I say this? I guess they're considered so low that they're not even in the caste system. It would be called the Dalits, or the untouchables, as they're commonly called. Untouchables are not treated really well within India. They do a lot of jobs that are considered to be, I guess, unclean, like cleaning out the sewers and cleaning bathrooms and cleaning the streets and things like that. Know the sites of ancient civilization in Asia. Okay, so maybe the oldest civilization begins in Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and the Indus rivers come together, and that's in present-day Iraq. So civilization there might be 10,000 years old. That's when people start settling down, become sedentary, start farming, and other things eventually happen also. Civilization begins on the North China Plain, along the Huanghe, the Huanghe, or the Yellow River. So just say North China Plain. That's probably 6,000 years old at least. Civilization begins along the Indus River. That's present-day Pakistan. That civilization might be 4,000 to 5,000 years old. Let's see here. Oh, the Nile, of course. Now that would not be in Asia, of course. That's in Africa, part of what's called the Middle East. So I think your answer should be Mesopotamia, the North China Plain, and the Indus River. Where would some Sikhs like to have an independent homeland? Well, that would be in the northern part of India, an area called the Punjab. They've talked about for years having a Punjabistan. Know how a kibbutz operates in Israel. Well, if you saw in the slideshow, I showed you a kibbutz, and I was fortunate to see a kibbutz and stay at a kibbutz. But they're agricultural industrial settlements within Israel. First one was established in about 1910, and probably 180,000 Israelis live on these kibbutzes. In theory, they're open to any Israeli citizen, but not everyone wants to live in like a communal, collective type of an environment. It is the one situation where I think communes have actually worked fairly well. Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. So Gandhi was the inspirational leader, the spiritual leader of India. So beginning back in 1918, he begins to lead a nonviolent revolution against Great Britain, which at the time was one of the more powerful nations of the world. So he was killed by a Hindu fundamentalist. I believe it was 1948, but he was kind of the spiritual leader for independence in South Asia and India. The first prime minister of India was Jawaharlal Nehru, and he was the prime minister from 1947 to 1964. When did Bangladesh achieve its independence? That would be 1972. Okay, remember it was West Pakistan. What is another name for the Yellow River in China? Huangho. Hwangho. That's in the Pinyin translation system, Huangho. Understand the responsibility system in China. Okay, Chairman Mao Zedong, the communist leader of China, dies in 1976. By 1979, you have a new Chinese leader that consolidates power. His name was Xi Jinping. That's Xi-Jinping. And the responsibility system resulted in changes in the business sector, the economy of China, as well as the agricultural sector. In the agricultural sector, it was kind of returned to private farming after they'd been through collectivization and communization, where the government took control of the land. They started to allow people in 1979 to have their own private farms again. In the cities, it was returned to a little bit more capitalistic type ideas, where people could own their own businesses, where factories could hire and fire workers. Inefficient factories started to close. Okay, the responsibility system. Understand the 4 modernizations in China. This was also Xi Jinping, and he saw that China was falling behind, so he called for the modernization of agriculture, industry, the military, and an increased emphasis on science and technology. So ag, industry, military, emphasis on science and technology. What are the population growth rates of Japan, China, and India? Japan's at about 0 population growth rate. China's at about 0.5, just a 0.5%. I have very weird neighbors here. I'm sorry they're interrupting your lecture. Okay, they're going down to get suntans, which they badly need. All right, so 0.5% in China. India is at about 1.4%. Pretty high growth rate still. Okay, what religion dominates in India? That would be Hinduism. In Pakistan, it would be Islam. Okay, what Chinese leader initiated the Cultural Revolution? That was 1966 to 76. That was Chairman Mao Zedong, Maozedong, and that's in Pinyin. Okay, what is the dry season in Southeast Asia? That's a monsoonal regime in India and Southeast Asia. Winter's dry, summer's wet. Understand the Great Leap Forward and the communization of agriculture that occurred in China. The Great Leap Forward was 1958, and that was the communization of agriculture. After Chairman Mao took over in 1949, he called for the collectivization of agriculture, where the government took over the land and the means of production. It got even more stringent in 1958, where on the collectives you might have had 100 families. On these communes, they had like 4,000 families together, and they would communally build roads, irrigation systems, and farm. It was kind of a failure. There was a great famine that occurred, and even reports of cannibalism, and a lot of people died during the Great Leap Forward in India. Communization of agriculture. Who were the Red Guards in China? The Red Guards were young people, a lot about your age, right, college age, who Chairman Mao and other communist leaders had them go out and charge people with crimes against society during the Cultural Revolution. Plays and operas were censored, art and bookwork was destroyed. Anybody that was thought to be spreading Western bourgeoisie ideas was maybe beaten up and tortured. So that would have been who the Red Guards were. Okay, the Deccan Plateau, that's entire southern central part of India. It's overlapping lava flows. So over millions of years, this thin running lava will come out and spread out and overlap each other. So that's what the Deccan Plateau is. Through which countries do the Tigris and Euphrates flow? That would be through the present day country of Iraq. The official language of India is Hindi. The largest ethnic group in China would be the Han Chinese. That's named after an old dynasty about 2,000 years ago. So the Han, like 92% Chinese people probably consider themselves Han Chinese. That's an ethnic designation. What is the most commonly spoken dialect in China? That is Mandarin Chinese. How are the Japanese islands forming? Plate subduction. You have one plate diving beneath another. Some of you may remember, you were probably young, I believe it was 2011, the big earthquake that occurred in China and the resulting tsunami. That's one plate diving beneath another, right? It also results in volcanic activity. That's how the Japanese islands have been forming. A Zionist would be a person who is ideologically committed to Jewish settlement in Palestine, that there should be a home for the Jewish people in what is now called Israel or Palestine. Understand the Camp David Accords. They occurred in 1979 through 1982. This is when Jimmy Carter got two old-time terrorists, freedom fighters, however you look at it, Anwar Sadat from Egypt, Menachem Begin from Israel, Anwar Sadat, Menachem Begin, and got him to take a walk in the woods, Camp David. And they came up with an agreement that Israel would give back the Sinai Peninsula, right, to Egypt. In return, Israel would get diplomatic and trade agreements with diplomatic recognition and trade agreements from Egypt. And at the time, this was a big deal because much of the Arab world doesn't have strong, favorable feelings towards Israel, to say the least. So, what it resulted in, it was sponsored by President Jimmy Carter, the return of the Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt. Israel gave it back. UN Resolution 242. Okay, this relates to the Six-Day War of 1967. In this war, which Israel won really big, they obtained or took, depending on your perspective, the West Bank and East Jerusalem from Jordan. They took the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, and they took the Golan Heights from Syria. Okay, so the UN got together after that and said this cannot happen. So UN Resolution 242 required Israel to give back the occupied territories. The West Bank of the Jordan River, the eastern part of Jerusalem, where a lot of holy shrines are located, the Gaza and the Sinai and the Golan. So this has not been totally fulfilled to this day. The Sinai Peninsula was given back as a result of the Camp David Accords. The Gaza Strip is now under control of the Palestinians. This happened a few years back. I think it's probably about 10 years ago or more now. Israel really wanted nothing to do with the Gaza, and Egypt really didn't want it back either. Densely populated and a lot of poverty there also. Okay, so a matching section on Chinese leaders. Okay, rather than that, I'd like you to tell me who Mao Zedong is, or was, sorry, Maozedong. Tell me about Deng Xiaoping, Deng Xiaoping, and tell me about Xi Jinping. He's the current leader of China, Xi, then Jinping. And maybe tell me about Confucius also. I think you should read about that a little bit. That might be fine for you to put that down also. Okay, the essay question. Give some background into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Include some information on the 1947 UN partition plan, the 1967 Six-Day War, and UN Resolution 242. Okay, I've covered some of that already, but let's look at this. In 1947, Great Britain had had enough of the Palestinian issue. They were in control of the area. They had gotten it from the Ottoman Turks back after World War I. So they kind of washed their hands of it and threw it into the UN's lap. The UN came with a partition plan, and it called for a 600,000 square mile Jewish state, 5,500 square mile Jewish state for the 600,000 Jewish people in the region, but only a 4,500 square mile state for the 1.4 million Palestinians in the region. So they were giving more land to the minority group. Palestinians said no. That's when war broke out, and many Arab nations intervened on behalf of the Palestinians. Anyways, Israel won that war, pretty big, and the country of Israel, that means one who strives with God, was created. When that happened, a lot of Palestinians were displaced throughout the Middle East. Israel calls that independence. The Palestinians call it the Great Catastrophe. And a lot of those lands that the Palestinians left are still in dispute today. Again, the Six-Day War was when Israel won this war, big, and they obtained the West Bank of the Jordan River, East Jerusalem, what has the Holy City, the Old City, and they got, again, the Sinai and the Gaza, that was from Egypt, and they got the Golan Heights. They took the Golan Heights from Syria. Okay, UN Resolution 242 was passed requiring Israel give back the occupied territories. In return, the Arab nations of the region were to acknowledge that Israel had a right to exist within the pre-1967 borders. Okay, so UN Resolution 242, again, Israel was to leave the occupied territories, and the Arab nations of the region to acknowledge that there could be a homeland for the Jewish people within the pre-1967 borders, the borders that occurred from 1948 to 1967. Okay, so solutions. This is really tough. I thought Bill Clinton had this right before he went out of office. They were talking about 95% of the West Bank and the Gaza and a quarter in between. Look on a map and find these places in your book. Was to go to the Palestinians, including half of the Old City. They were to get the Islamic sector, and they were to get the Christian sector of the Old City, the quarters. Yasser Arafat, the Palestinian leader at this time, turned it down. Ehud Barak, the Israeli leader, accepted it. But Bill Clinton said shortly after that, within a month, Yasser Arafat begged for that same deal, but it was too late. The Israeli public turned against it. So you got problems now. You have 400,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank. They live there now. So what do you do with those people if you give the West Bank back to the Palestinians? I mean, you have to forcibly relocate some, buy some out. That's very, very, very complicated. Does Israel just annex the West Bank and say, hey, it's just ours now? The problem is that you would have Israel in control of a greater Israel, if you will, which would include the West Bank. The population growth rate for the Palestinians is at least twice as high as it is for the Jewish people. And at some point, there would be more Palestinians in Israel than there would be Jewish people, and the Zionist dream of a Jewish state would be over with. So I don't think the Jewish country is going to allow this. If you annex the West Bank, and then you didn't allow, say, the Palestinians to be citizens and couldn't vote, you'd be an occupying power. You would not be a real democracy. So it's a real dilemma, and if you have any ideas, write them down for me. So write a good essay for me. Please get everything in on time. This is your final, okay? All right, good luck on everything, you guys.